Welcome to South Pod. I'm your host, John Yerian. We're at the event. This is the real thing. This is Dig South Live, which is exciting. I'm joined by Jordan Berry of Interloop.
Yeah.
We just got on stage.
We did, yeah.
We just did a whole panel.
Yeah.
But now we got to pretend to not
The
know
energy's
each
still
other.
going, yeah, we're relaxing. So
now we got to start over and act
yeah.
like we don't already know each other.
Yeah.
Jordan, thank you for coming. And before we get into any questions, tell me a little bit about the company and what brought you to the conference this year.
Yeah, so like you said, with Interloop, so I'm the CTO co-founder. We're coming up on our 5th year as a company, so we were the quintessential startup from Charleston, and we've been slowly growing, ever since. But actually, we came to Dig South 4 years ago, and that's really what brought us to Charleston, which was great. I was in Chicago at the time. My co-founder was in upstate of South Carolina, and once we saw there was a community here, we said this is where you have to be. So, and been here ever since.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because presumably you could have founded in a bunch of other places. It sounds like you made a conscious decision to grow the company here. What led to that?
It's interesting. I'm from South Carolina originally, so I think there was a pull to come back, but went through the Midwest, was in Chicago doing traditional management consulting, and just saw a need for, well, at the time it was a whole different concept, but basically this need to use data for predicting and modeling and things of that nature. And when we came to Charleston, we live in a very virtual world. We were even hybrid before the pandemic. And so part of it was lifestyle. Hey, we want to live where we want to work and play and have a good time. And then part of it was just we saw that there was this growth in Charleston, and part of our core mission is to help Charleston grow and be a part of that. So we kind of sat down, had a heart-to-heart, Tony and I, my co-founder, and said, where are we going to set up shop? Where are we going to do this? And Charleston was the answer.
Well, in the world of data analytics, I guess 5 years is probably like 50. I'm curious, what has changed, what has surprised you when you look back on the original assumptions of the company and what you thought you'd be doing? How different is the world today?
It's a bit different, for sure. Quite a bit different. We were very bullish on AI and artificial intelligence, so that's where we started, was in the predictive space. And I'll give you a quick pitch on our previous company thesis, but it was basically Moneyball for salespeople. Okay. So using stats to help each salesperson be their best, sure. And trying to put the right team together using some data. And while I think that idea is still sound, as we went into the world and said, hey, company A, company B, company C, can we help you accomplish this? They just kept saying, that sounds awesome, but our data's a mess. We got to start here. We got to start ground zero. We got to do the foundational work. And we kept hearing that 3, 4, 10 times, and that's when we realized, hold on, we need to shift to the basics here. We're trying to go 1,000 miles an hour.
So there's an accumulating data set that you eventually paid attention to.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay,
and so that's where we pivoted to more foundational data, but it's a real need. And so that's some advice to startups is find the real need. And it took us a while, but once we did, we jumped in.
And are you working primarily with startups, small to medium-sized businesses, enterprise-class Star Destroyers?
Yeah, so we're kind of in the middle. So we focus on mid-market companies. So usually companies 5 to 500 million in revenue, 50+ employees. You probably don't feel that data pain until you have multiple departments, different tools. So that's really our sweet spot. The enterprise-grade companies tend to hire data teams, so they have whole internal departments. But those middle ground companies, they can't always afford to hire a bunch of people to do data. And so we're really that outsourced data team for them.
And what's the environment like for your clients in terms of finding the tools, the software, the platforms they need? That seems like kind of a tough area. They're going to be too big for these kind of rinky-dink, out-of-the-box solutions. They can't afford these kind of fully bespoke, massive systems. Is that getting better, or does it just kind of suck for them in terms of their tools?
It's interesting. So I would say a lot of companies have taken what I call best of breed approach. So they'll buy, a piece of software for sales, a piece of software for marketing, a piece of software for accounting, and then inevitably what happens is they say, we need some data from here, we need some data from here. So they start building these point-to-point solutions where we push data, we pull data, and you get to a point where now you have 50+ systems. Only some of them talk to each other. Some are, they use data in different ways. And so as you're starting to answer questions or try to answer questions, you need a centralized place to analyze that data. And so, a lot of times you'll kind of come into a spaghetti mess of systems and data, and there's a better way. And especially the last 5 years, some of the bigger companies like Netflix and Amazon have proven a newer approach that even the smaller companies can use.
And do you deliver that from a software perspective? I mean, do you install something that acts like Switzerland for all the data, or is it a consultative professional services approach where it's like you help them stitch it together?
Yeah, so you may have heard the term, data lake, data warehouse, that type of thing. So really the pendulum has kind of swung both ways. So originally it was data warehouses from the 80s. Then we moved to data lakes, which was totally freeform, and we're kind of landing in this lake house middle ground. So I like to say I sell lake houses for a living, which is great. But essentially we help companies set up their lake house so they can centralize the data, and there's not as many inner tubes, but yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what's the future like? Will you be in Charleston forever? Is the company kind of remote and distributed? What's the situation for you guys?
Yeah, what's been nice is, post-pandemic, we've actually grown a bit. So we're, hiring people here locally in Charleston. We're hoping we can build a core contingent here. We do have a couple analysts across the country, New Jersey, Texas, that kind of thing. So I think we want the core to be here, but, candidly, it's just talent. We're looking for the right people to fill the right slots.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and this might be, if you're listening to this might be a time to perk up your ears a little bit. Jordan, let me know, what is the most common misconception or most closely held myth that you find yourself fighting against with this kind of mid-sized CEO, CTO, whoever you're stuck with? What are the battles you have to get through?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where data is something we'll get to tomorrow, or it's too big to tackle, or it's the elephant. So how do I get started? I don't know. And so the inevitable answer is, we'll just do nothing. We're doing okay, so let's just keep going there. The challenge is if you're in a competitive market, if you're looking to grow, that's just not the right answer. And so I would say the biggest challenge is you have to have somebody internally that's willing to take the risk, kind of put their neck out there and say, hey, I'm going to be the data champion. I'm going to be that, the loud voice in the room. And that's a risky position to be in, especially if, the company's going this way and trying to move it this way. And so you have to find companies that are not only, curious about becoming data driven, but you have somebody internally that can champion a project, champion, a first foray into data. Because if they're working with us, hopefully they're not having issues, but if you have that failed data project, it can kind of put a mark on the whole data initiative.
Yeah, and I think that's even tougher when that data champion's probably not going to be in that job for longer than 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing you've got clients and relationships where you are you vastly out tenure your counterpart inside, right? Because of that turnover. Is that a huge challenge for you, churn, in terms of CMOs or CTOs who maybe aren't going to be around long enough to really realize the benefits?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we haven't encountered that too much in our experience, but you will find that obviously people get promoted, they move around in the company, and so that data champion, either goes and instills it in another department, or you get somebody with a totally different mindset. So you do have to battle that a little bit. I think if you set a data foundation and you get the ball rolling, it's hard to stop it. So as long as a company is committed to being data driven, they've taken the right steps, whether you're moving people in and out, eventually it catches fire and it becomes just a way, talk about culture, it just becomes part of the culture.
Sure. So this mindset, right, operating from data, and we covered this on the panel, but for the listeners who weren't here today, I loved what you had to say a few minutes ago. I'm curious what advice or recommendation you give any individual, any up-and-coming leader or professional who want to think differently to apply some of these principles, but aren't in a position to hire a data guru or a CTO or a massive piece. So what would you tell them? What's a way to start to implement or operate from data-driven decision-making?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it starts with the questions. So, what are you feeling pain about? What are the questions you can't answer as a business person? And I'm sure there are some, right? You get in those moments and you're with your board or you're in a team meeting, someone's asking a question and you don't really know the answer. Start to compile those, start to just break down a list, because those are the questions that then you can start to figure out, okay, if I want to answer this, I have to start back here. I have to know where the data lives, I have to know what it means, I have to know how to combine it to answer that question. So to me, that's the first step is, what are the pains we're feeling, what are the questions we're trying to answer? And then you can find the right people to do the technical bits. And so it's to me, it's identifying what's the value, how do you pull the value out of the data?
Sure. And just paint a picture for us, for the listeners, of the kind of person who should be reaching out to you for help, pronto.
Yeah.
Who should be making the call?
It's, it doesn't really play into a certain industry, but we are realizing that a lot of manufacturing, distribution, any companies that have multi-tier selling processes where it starts with you, it goes through wholesaler, hit the retail. There's a huge data gap that happens there where we have numbers in mind, we're trying to hit these KPIs, but then it just gets lost in the weeds. So we found that those types of companies really have challenges, just understanding their data, and if you can start to use some predictive models, some AI, some ML, now all of a sudden you're being proactive, you're thinking about the future, rather than just kind of sitting back and letting the market control your destiny.
That's great. Give us a URL or where people can go to learn more about the company.
Yeah, so check us out online, Interloop.ai. You can learn a little bit there, or just reach out. Jordan and Tony Berry, we're the co-founders, so happy to have a conversation. We do have a data-driven assessment, so if you're curious, where you are in the data maturity lifecycle, we can help you kind of gauge so that you can exactly, So yeah, hey, but yeah, so yeah, check us out, Interloop.
Fantastic, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, appreciate you having us. Thanks.